Your bread is poisoning you, and the company's making it know exactly what they're doing. That loaf you bought yesterday, it contains ingredients banned in multiple countries, things that have been linked to cancer, diabetes, and behavioral problems in children. But here in the UK, they're perfectly legal. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to expose exactly which 8 bread brands you need to avoid and why. I'll show you what's really in them, what it's doing to your body, and most importantly, what you should be buying instead. By the end of this, you'll never grab the same loaf again. Number 8. Warburtons. I know, I can already hear some of you saying, but Warburtons is everywhere. It's a British classic. And you're right, it is everywhere. That's exactly why we need to talk about it. Look at a standard Warburtons white loaf. Open up the ingredients list. You'll find something called E4722E. Sounds harmless enough, right? Just a number. But E4722E is actually mono and diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides. Try saying that 3 times fast. This is an emulsifier, and while it's technically approved for use, research has shown that emulsifiers can disrupt your gut bacteria. Your gut contains trillions of microorganisms that regulate everything from your immune system to your mental health. When you mess with that balance, you're not just affecting digestion, you're affecting your entire body. Many Warburtons loaves also contain something called a flour treatment agent. This includes L-cysteine, which can be derived from duck feathers or even human hair. Yes, you read that right. The bread you're feeding your children might contain processed hair protein. And here's something most people don't realize. Warburtons uses what's called the Chorleywood bread process. This is an industrial method invented in the 1960s that allows bread to be made in under 3 hours instead of the traditional 12 to 16 hours. How do they do it? By adding extra yeast, chemical improvers, and using high-speed mixers that beat air into the dough violently. This process destroys the natural structure of wheat proteins. Your digestive system has to work harder to break down bread made this way. That bloated feeling after eating a sandwich. That's not normal. That's your body struggling with chemically accelerated bread. The Chorleywood process also means the bread never develops the complex flavors and nutrients that come from slow fermentation. Instead, manufacturers add extra sugar, fat, and salt to make up for the lack of real flavor. You're essentially eating industrial foam held together with chemicals. Number 7. Hovis. Hovis has built its entire brand on nostalgia. That classic TV advert with the boy pushing his bike up the hill. British heritage. Wholesome goodness. Except when you actually examine what's in the bag, the story gets a lot less wholesome. Take their standard white loaf. It contains something called caramel coloring. You might think, caramel? That's just sugar, right? Wrong. The caramel coloring used in processed foods is created through a chemical process that produces compounds called 4-methylimidazole. Studies have linked this compound to potential cancer risks. In animals, is the amount in one slice of bread going to harm you? Probably not. But you're not eating just one slice. You're eating it multiple times a day, every day, for years. That accumulation matters. Hovis also uses palm oil in several of their products. The palm oil used in cheap bread is often highly processed, stripped of any nutritional benefits, and used purely as a cheap fat substitute. Here's what really bothers me about Hovis. They market themselves as the healthy, traditional choice. They slap wholemeal on the label and add some seeds to the crust. But when you flip that bag over and read the ingredients, you realize you've been sold a story, not actual nutrition. Their soft white range reads like a chemistry experiment. Wheat flour, water, yeast, that's fine. But then it continues. Vegetable oils, salt, emulsifiers, flour treatment agent, preservative, and something called soya flour. Why is soya flour in bread? Because it's cheaper than wheat flour and it helps the dough rise faster. But soya is one of the most genetically modified crops in the world. Unless it specifically says organic soya, you're almost certainly eating GMO ingredients. Hovis also has a dirty little secret about their wholemeal bread. They mill the wheat, strip away the bran and germ to make white flour, then add some of it back later to create wholemeal. Real wholemeal bread should be made from flour that was never separated in the first place. By splitting and recombining, they destroy much of the nutritional value and natural structure. Number 6. Kingsmill. Kingsmill loves to talk about their Great White range. Great for who, exactly? because it's certainly not great for your blood sugar. Their white bread has a glycemic index of around 75. That's higher than pure sugar. When you eat high GI foods, your blood sugar spikes rapidly. Your pancreas panics and releases a flood of insulin. Then your blood sugar crashes, leaving you tired, hungry, and craving more carbs. It's a vicious cycle that can lead to insulin resistance, weight gain, and eventually type 2 diabetes. But here's the really sneaky part. Kingsmill's 50-50 bread, marketed as a healthier option because it blends white and wholemeal flour, still contains high fructose glucose syrup. This sweetener is linked to fatty liver disease, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. Why would bread need high fructose glucose syrup? Because it makes it taste slightly sweet, which increases the likelihood you'll buy it again. It triggers the same reward centers in your brain that addictive substances do. You're not imagining that you crave that specific bread. You've been conditioned to want it. And don't even get me started on their tasty wholemeal range. The second ingredient after wholemeal flour, sugar. They've taken something that should be nutritious and turned it into a vehicle for hidden sugar consumption. If you're buying bread that lists sugar in the top 3 ingredients, you're not buying bread, you're buying cake disguised as a sandwich base. Let me break down what happens when you eat Kingsmill bread for breakfast. You have toast at 7 in the morning. By 8:30, your blood sugar has spiked and crashed. You're tired, unfocused, reaching for another coffee or a biscuit. By 10:30, you're starving again, even though you ate just 3 hours ago. This isn't hunger, this is blood sugar chaos, and it's completely engineered by the ingredients in that bread. Kingsmill also uses something called rapeseed oil in many of their loaves. Rapeseed oil, also sold as canola oil, is highly processed and often partially hydrogenated. This creates trans fats, which are among the worst things you can put in your body. Trans fats raise bad cholesterol, lower good cholesterol, and significantly increase your risk of heart disease. The UK banned artificial trans fats in 2018, but naturally occurring trans fats from processing oils are still allowed. Kingsmill's rapeseed oil falls into this category. They're technically complying with regulations while still selling you something harmful. And here's the kicker. Kingsmill is owned by Associated British Foods, the same company that owns Primark. They know how to maximize profit margins. They know how to use the cheapest possible ingredients and market them as quality. Your health isn't their concern. Your repeat purchases are. Number 5. Sainsbury's own brand. Supermarket-owned brands are tricky because people assume they're basically the same as branded versions, just cheaper. Sometimes that's true, but with Sainsbury's bread, cheaper means cutting corners in ways that should concern you. Their economy white bread contains something called calcium propionate. This is a preservative that extends shelf life by preventing mold growth. Sounds useful, right? Here's the problem. Studies have linked calcium propionate to behavioral issues in children, including irritability, sleep problems, and difficulty concentrating. One study published in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health found that when children with ADHD symptoms were given bread with calcium propionate, their behavior worsened significantly. When the preservative was removed from their diet, symptoms improved. Sainsbury's budget loaves use it in higher concentrations to maximize shelf life, because these loaves sit in warehouses and on shelves longer than premium brands. There's also the issue of flour quality. Sainsbury's economy bread uses the cheapest possible flour, often bleached and stripped of any nutritional value. They then add back synthetic vitamins to meet legal fortification requirements. But your body doesn't absorb synthetic vitamins the same way it absorbs nutrients from whole foods. You're essentially eating nutritionally dead bread that's been given a vitamin injection so it can legally be called fortified. Let me tell you about what bleaching flour actually means. Flour naturally ages and whitens over time through oxidation, but that takes months, and time is money. So manufacturers use chemical bleaching agents like chlorine dioxide, benzoyl peroxide, or potassium bromate to whiten flour in hours instead of months. These chemicals don't just whiten, they alter the molecular structure of the flour. Chlorine dioxide, for example, reacts with proteins in flour to create alloxan, a compound used in laboratory settings to induce diabetes in test animals. Yes, you read that correctly. A compound that causes diabetes in lab rats is created when flour is bleached with chlorine. Sainsbury's also uses monoglycerides and diglycerides as emulsifiers. These are created by breaking down fats, often from animal sources, though they don't specify which animals on the label. If you're vegetarian, vegan, or avoid pork for religious reasons, you might be unknowingly consuming ingredients that violate your beliefs or ethics. If you're finding this information valuable, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I'm exposing the truth about everyday products that most people buy without thinking twice. And trust me, what's coming next is even more shocking. Number 4. Asda Smart Price. If you've ever wondered how a loaf of bread can cost 50 pence, this is your answer. Asda Smart Price bread is engineered for one thing: maximum profit through minimum ingredient cost. The flour used in these loaves is the lowest grade possible. We're talking about flour that's been so heavily processed and chemically treated that it barely resembles the wheat it came from. It's been bleached with chlorine gas or benzoyl peroxide to make it white. But the real villain in Asda Smart Price bread is something called azodicarbonamide. This chemical is used as a flour improver to make dough more elastic and easier to work with industrially. Here's the disturbing part. Azodicarbonamide is also used to make yoga mats and shoe soles. When azodicarbonamide breaks down during baking, it forms semicarbazide and ethyl carbamate. Both of these compounds are considered possible carcinogens. The European Food Safety Authority has expressed concerns about these breakdown products, yet the additive remains approved for use in the UK. Asda will point out that the amounts used are tiny and within legal limits, and that's true. But why take the risk at all? Why eat bread that contains a chemical also found in your gym equipment? Let me paint you a picture of how Asda Smart Price bread is made. It starts with the lowest grade wheat. Often reject wheat that didn't meet quality standards for other products. This wheat is ground into flour using industrial steel rollers that generate heat, which destroys any remaining nutrients. The flour is then bleached, aged with chemicals, and treated with improvers to make it workable. Water is added, along with the cheapest yeast available. Then comes the sugar, not for taste, but because yeast needs sugar to work faster. Salt is added in amounts that exceed what's necessary for flavor. Why? Salt masks the lack of real taste and makes you thirsty, which means you're more likely to buy a drink with your sandwich. Asda Smart Price white bread contains less than 1 gram of fiber per slice. Your digestive system needs fiber to function properly. Without it, food moves slowly through your intestines, toxins aren't eliminated efficiently, and you end up constipated, bloated, and uncomfortable. Number 3. Tesco Value. Tesco Value bread follows the same playbook as Asda, but they've added their own twist. Many of their budget loaves contain something called modified wheat starch. Modified starch is created by chemically or physically altering regular starch to change its properties. This process can involve treating starch with acids, enzymes, or even radiation. The end product behaves differently in food, helping create a softer texture that lasts longer. The problem? Modified starches can cause digestive issues in sensitive individuals. They're harder for your body to break down, which can lead to bloating, gas, and irregular bowel movements. A standard slice contains less than 1 gram of fiber. Your body needs around 30 grams of fiber per day for optimal digestive health. If you're eating bread that provides almost none, you're missing a crucial opportunity for nutrition. Tesco also uses something called vegetable oil in their budget ranges. Sounds innocent enough, right? Except that vegetable oil is a vague term that can include heavily refined rapeseed oil, palm oil, or soybean oil. These oils are highly processed, often rancid before they even reach the bread-making facility, and contain high levels of omega-6 fatty acids that promote inflammation when consumed in excess. Let me explain what chronic inflammation does to your body. It's not the acute inflammation you get from a cut or infection. Chronic inflammation is low-level, constant inflammation that silently damages your cells, tissues, and organs over years. It contributes to arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and even cancer. And one of the biggest dietary contributors to chronic inflammation is excessive omega-6 fatty acids from refined vegetable oils. What frustrates me most about Tesco is its market position. They're the largest supermarket chain in the UK. They have the resources to source better ingredients to make real bread at affordable prices. But instead, they choose to maximize profit margins by selling the cheapest possible product. Number 2. Lidl Baker's Life. Now we're getting into serious territory. Lidl has exploded in popularity across the UK, and its in-house bakery section seems fresh and appealing. The smell of baking bread fills the store. It feels artisanal. It feels real. It's not. Lidl's Baker's Life range uses a technique called part baking. The bread is made in factories abroad, particularly in Germany and Poland, then partially baked, frozen, and shipped to UK stores where it's finished in in-store ovens. This is why it smells so good. You're smelling the final bake, not the actual bread-making process. Why does this matter? Because part-baked bread requires additional preservatives to survive the freezing and transport process. These preservatives aren't always listed clearly on the packaging because they're considered processing aids rather than ingredients. But here's the real issue with Lidl's bread: quality control. In 2018, Lidl had to recall several batches of bread due to contamination with plastic pieces. In 2020, there were reports of metal fragments found in loaves. These aren't isolated incidents. Lidl's Baker's Life white bread also contains dextrose, which is just another form of sugar. Combined with the refined flour, you're getting a 1-2 punch of blood sugar disruption. The most frustrating part? Lidl markets this bread as freshly baked in-store, when it's really just finished in-store. It's misleading marketing at its finest. When bread is frozen, ice crystals form within the dough structure. These crystals rupture cell walls and break down starches. When the bread is thawed and baked, it can never fully recover its original texture and structure. To compensate, manufacturers add extra gluten, gums, and emulsifiers to hold everything together. These additives make the bread feel soft and fresh, but they're also harder to digest and can trigger sensitivities in people who normally tolerate wheat just fine. Another issue with Lidl bread is the salt content. Some of their white loaves contain over 1 gram of salt per 100 grams of bread. 4 slices give you nearly a third of your daily salt limit, and you haven't even had lunch or dinner yet. Excessive salt doesn't just raise blood pressure. It damages the lining of your blood vessels, forces your kidneys to work harder, and causes calcium to leach from your bones. Over the years, this contributes to osteoporosis, especially in women. Number 1. Aldi Village Bakery. And here we are, the worst offender. Aldi's Village Bakery range. I want to be clear, I'm not anti-Aldi. They've revolutionized UK grocery shopping by making food more affordable, but their bread is where they've cut corners too deeply. Village Bakery bread contains an ingredient called potassium bromate in some of its specialty loaves. This is a flour improver that's been banned in the EU, Canada, Brazil, and China because it's classified as a possible carcinogen, yet it still appears in some UK-produced bread through regulatory loopholes. When potassium bromate is heated during baking, most of it converts to potassium bromide, which is considered safer. Most, but not all, residual amounts remain in the finished bread. And while those amounts are tiny, the cumulative effect of eating this bread daily for years is unknown. Aldi's standard white loaves also contain the highest levels of salt I've found in any UK supermarket bread. A single slice can contain 0.4 grams of salt. If you're eating 6 slices a day, which isn't unusual for someone having toast for breakfast and sandwiches for lunch, that's 2.4 grams of salt just from bread. The NHS recommends no more than 6 grams of salt per day. Excess salt intake is directly linked to high blood pressure, stroke, and heart disease. It also makes you retain water, leading to bloating and that puffy feeling you can't quite explain. But the absolute worst thing about Aldi Village Bakery, the deceptive health claims. They have a super-seeded range that sounds incredibly healthy. It's covered in seeds. It looks nutritious. Then you check the ingredients and find that the base is still refined white flour with added gluten to make it chewier. The seeds are just sprinkled on top for appearance. You're paying extra for what looks like health food, but it's really just the same problematic bread with a seed disguise. Let me tell you what really happens with Aldi's production process. They use what's called a centralized manufacturing model. Bread is made in massive factories that produce hundreds of thousands of loaves per day. At that scale, quality control becomes nearly impossible. Flour comes from the cheapest suppliers, often blended from wheat sources across multiple countries. There's no traceability. You have no idea where your wheat was grown, how it was treated, or what pesticides were used. The dough is machine mixed at high speeds, which generates heat and breaks down gluten structure. It's then divided by weight using automated equipment, placed in tins and sent through industrial ovens that bake hundreds of loaves at once. This entire process, from flour to bagged loaf, takes under 3 hours. Traditional bread making takes 12 to 16 hours minimum. You simply cannot create nutritious, digestible bread in 3 hours. It's physically impossible. Aldi also uses something called calcium sulfate in their bread. This is essentially plaster of Paris, the same stuff used for wall repairs. In bread, it acts as a dough conditioner and provides calcium fortification. But calcium sulfate can interfere with iron absorption and cause digestive upset in sensitive individuals. Here's the thing that bothers me most about Aldi. They've built their brand on offering German quality at low prices. German bread is world-renowned. Real German bread is made with whole grains, sourdough cultures, and traditional methods. But Aldi's UK bread? It's not German quality. It's German efficiency applied to the cheapest possible ingredients. You're getting the speed and scale of German manufacturing without any of the quality standards that make German bread worth eating. Okay, I know that was heavy. You might be looking at your kitchen right now thinking, what am I supposed to eat? Don't worry, there are genuinely good options out there. Look for bread from small, independent bakeries that list fewer than 7 ingredients. Real sourdough made with just flour, water, and salt is ideal because the fermentation process breaks down compounds that cause digestive issues and lowers the glycemic impact. If you're buying from supermarkets, go for brands like Bertinet Bread, Artisan Grains, or Biona Organic. Yes, they cost more, but you're paying for real ingredients and honest production. You can also make your own. It's easier than you think. A basic no-knead bread requires 5 minutes of work and costs about 40 pence per loaf. You control exactly what goes in. No chemicals, no preservatives, just real food. Or consider alternatives entirely. Sourdough rye, sprouted grain bread, or even lettuce wraps and vegetable-based sandwich alternatives can completely change how you feel. The goal isn't to never eat bread again. The goal is to eat bread that nourishes you, rather than slowly undermining your health. So, what do you think? Are you eating any of these brands right now? Have you noticed how you feel after eating certain loaves? Drop a comment below because I genuinely want to know your experience. And if this opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to see it. Your mum, your mate, anyone who's eating these brands without knowing what's really inside.